London
Nards Vlog yan, support po natin. London Nards Vlog. More power.
Down the famous long walk, that nearly 3-mile stretch that leads to the gates of Windsor Castle, and as we can see, William and Kate paying their respects, greeting people in the crowds, and no doubt thanking them for coming. And this will no doubt be difficult for the two brothers. Anyone who's lost a grandparent knows how difficult that can be, but of course they cannot grieve privately behind closed doors. As with his new title comes new responsibilities he's been preparing for, no doubt. But it's another reminder of the life they lead in public.
Yes, and of course Windsor only recently being such a focal point. In April last year, for the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh, that period of time, of course, when the Queen cut such a lonely figure. We were still in the midst of the pandemic. Very different, of course, now. We are through that, and people can take part in the remembrance of the Queen. There can be walkabouts like this. People can shake hands with the royals. And we saw something very similar yesterday, as Vernon was just saying. Important for the new king to come out when he arrived at Buckingham Palace and meet the well-wishers. A very warm walkabout, I thought, Vernon. We heard God Save the King and some people singing the new national anthem. And this is the important part of the next week, and the nation being able to take part and fully remember the Queen and everything that she gave to the country.
Absolutely. And at the lying in state of George VI in 1952, over 1 million people passed the catafalque, and I suspect the Queen will attract more than 1 million people who wish to pay their respects. I expect there'll be queues for miles outside Westminster Hall next week when the Queen's coffin is moved there. It will be a striking display, I think, of the affection which people felt for the Queen.
As we look at the Walesers here, in constitutional terms, he has played such a prominent role for nearly 20 years, as he says in his statement today now, and helping his father, helping the Queen as she stood back from some of her royal duties. Constitutionally, does the title he's just inherited, does it make a difference?
Well, this is a very interesting point. There is no template, no job description of what the Prince of Wales could do. And the present king is, I think, the first person to have found a genuine role for the heir to the throne in matters like his charities, for example. Now, he said in his speech yesterday that he wouldn't have quite the same amount of time for his charities as he did before, and I suspect a lot of that work will devolve upon the Prince of Wales. I suspect he will undertake a great deal of that. And you and Rihanna were discussing a little while ago how important his role will be, how he'll have more work, and I think that is right. He'll have a huge burden, and it's just as difficult in some ways to follow the previous Prince of Wales as it is for the King to follow the previous Queen, but I'm sure that the Prince and Princess of Wales will manage to do that. It's not a role in which there's any job description. You have to find the work for yourself and really contribute something towards, if you like, the public service monarchy.
I remember the pictures of the Queen and the young Prince of Wales when he was invested with his new title as a young man. Will we see something similar for William?
I suspect there will be an investiture, yes. It was first introduced in modern times by Lloyd George in 1911 for the Prince of Wales, who became Edward VIII, and that was to soothe Welsh susceptibilities. And then it was revived in 1969 for the present king, and it was said by rather cynical people it was done by the then government because the Welsh nationalists were gaining support and they wanted to head it off a bit. So there's a bit of politics behind it all, but I suspect we will see another investiture, yes.
He is the modern and the new, mixed with the tradition and the protocol of the royal family. How do you think he will do that job differently to his father?
I suspect he will actually model himself on his father. His father really did develop the role of being heir to the throne. It was quite new. I mean, he could have done absolutely nothing and just whiled away his time. He didn't do that. He found a role for himself. He founded these various charities. He made particular connections with people who, as it were hard up on their luck, the disenfranchised, if you like, the unemployed, ex-prisoners, young
Sixers as well, who are there in the forefront of our picture, Rihanna. We know how close, despite the difficulties they've had in the last years or so, how close Harry was to his granny, and he made that point a lot. And he flew in from Europe on Thursday to be there as quickly as he could.
Certainly, and I think we all saw those images as he arrived at the airport, just slightly behind everyone else due to logistical reasons. And I don't think anyone expected to necessarily see them here today, especially not alongside Prince William, the Prince of Wales. Yeah, there they are. Alongside the Princess of Wales, as I said, making her first public appearance since she received the title yesterday evening. But yeah, no, certainly this is going to be a difficult time for all of the family, and this is such a strong sign of unity. And of course we saw that yesterday as well with Prince Charles as he made his first speech as king, paying love to all of his children, to both of his children, and to all of the family at large. So yes, it's definitely I suppose an unexpected scene, but one that is being warmly welcomed by all of the crowds who are, to be honest, in stunned silence to be witnessing such a public display of mourning at such a monumentous time in history.
Yeah. You see the emotion there as Meghan just stroked the back of Harry as they were looking at some of those tributes. Let me just be quiet for a moment, because you see the banks of crowds there at the railings, but just listen to the hush, the quiet respect that there is.
This is a pretty good indication. This was not an announcement advertised event that you're seeing. In fact, they had
Worth saying, of course, that the town very much part of the royal family's grief, because the castle is so close to the town, and the royal family very much part of it as they walk over to greet some of the well-wishers who are there. The Prince and Princess of Wales recently moved into the Windsor area. In fact, Wednesday was a happy day as the two of them took their children to their new school. And then, of course, it changed so dramatically on Thursday with news of the Queen's condition. Such an extraordinary shot there of the crowds on either side of the drive. You can see about 7 or 8 deep. See if we can listen in. And Rihanna, it's been quite a busy day for the Prince, of course. He was in the Accession Council today, stood behind his father. He signed the Accession Declaration. And he is taking on new duties, the duties that his father has had all his life as the new Prince of Wales. And his father will need his support in the days and months ahead.
Definitely, as you mentioned, this is a huge moment of change for them, not just in terms of loss, but with that loss comes the realities of the responsibilities that his new titles will bring, as he is the heir apparent. And of course, here they are in Windsor, where, as you mentioned earlier, they don't live too far away from. And this week, again, was a big moment of change for them with their 3 children. Prince Louis, who's just 4, who's just started school, Princess Charlotte, who's 7, and also Prince George, who's 9, all starting school this week. So it's been quite a moment for them. And sorry if I'm kind of losing my words here, in some ways I don't want to break up with what was such a respectful, stunned moment of silence with everybody just, in some ways, in utter disbelief at what they're seeing, at such a difficult time for them.
Yes, you can see that people are very keen, of course, to meet the Prince and Princess of Wales, and one moment like this is, for many of them, the selfies, of course, and the photographs that are being taken, but all with the quiet respect that you would anticipate on an occasion like this. With me in the studio is the historian Vernon Bogdanor, Professor of Government at King's College London. He also wrote the book on the monarch and the Constitution. It's been a compelling day, hasn't it, with the protocol and also this more modern aspect of royal life.
Absolutely. It is quite significant, I think, that the new Prince and Princess of Wales are talking to people outside Windsor Castle, just as the King spoke to people yesterday outside Buckingham Palace. That didn't happen in 1952 when George VI died. It was a more remote monarchy in a much more deferential society. And I believe we're going to see a new style of monarchy which reaches out much more to the public than has been possible in the past. And I think what we've seen today and yesterday heralds that.
And he mentioned that in his address last night. He said, in her life of service, the Queen showed us an abiding love of tradition, together with that fearless embrace of progress.
Well, that is the dilemma for the monarchy, how to combine tradition and modernity. People think you're not relevant. If you're too modern, people think that is somehow a bit odd also. You have to combine the two very carefully, and what we've seen this morning is much more of the traditional, the Accession Council, very, some would say, archaic. I mean, who knows what the Earl Marshal does, or Garter, King of Arms, and so on. And this afternoon, with the Prince and Princess of Wales, we're seeing a more modern side of monarchy, and I believe that balance is absolutely fundamental for the future of the monarchy.
You heard in the voice of the King last night his appreciation for the affection that the public have shown for the Queen, but also there was a notable moment where he talked of his love for Harry and Meghan and the new role that the Prince and Princess of Wales are taking on. I think he'll be very conscious, won't he, about, given the history that the children have been through, he'll be very conscious about what a period of change this is for them.
It's very significant. This is a moment for reconciliation. It was clear in the King's remarks about Harry and Meghan. Reconciliation within the family. And if one can put it perhaps a bit wider, a moment for greater reconciliation in the country. It's significant, I think, that the Railway Union has called off the strike that was going to be held. The nurses have decided not to have a ballot on strike action. It's a remarkable moment when the country comes together above political conflict and above even family disputes. And the King has marked the beginning of the reign with that image of reconciliation, which I think is very valuable.
The Windsors, the Walesers have just moved into Windsor. They live now around 2 miles from the castle. Do you think there will still be the connection with Windsor? I mean, the King obviously likes. He has lived at St James's Palace. Churchill was very adamant that the Queen needed to be at Buckingham Palace, the office, as she called it. But presumably this connection with Windsor will continue, will it?
Yes, well, all that's up to members of the royal family, of course. I personally can see no reason why, if the King doesn't want to live at Buckingham Palace, if he regards Buckingham Palace just as an office, that shouldn't be the situation. It's up to them how they make their domestic arrangements, it seems to me.
For people who are just joining us, we should just tell them that this is the walkabout, the live pictures that we're bringing you from Windsor. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex in the shot at the moment. Also the Prince and Princess of Wales at the other side of the drive, meeting well-wishers. A scene of unity, really, the two brothers coming together this evening. We've also had important details, which we've been bringing you over the course of the last 10 minutes or so, about the funeral. We do now have a date. It is on the 19th, Monday the 19th. It will be a public holiday at Westminster Abbey at 11 o'clock in the morning. So, Vernon, let me talk to you about that. You were at the state funeral for George VI.
I wasn't at it. I remembered it.
You
as a very
remember it?
small
I beg your
boy.
pardon.
I certainly wasn't at it.
Right, okay. So you remember it. Do you suspect that will be the template for what we see next Monday?
Broadly speaking, the arrangements are in accordance with precedents, but the precedents have been tweaked a bit because the Queen died in Scotland, and her coffin will be for 2 days in Edinburgh next week, and the King will come to Edinburgh and speak in Scotland, and also presumably have talks with the First Minister of Scotland, because of course in 1952 we didn't have any devolved bodies, parliaments, assemblies, senates and the like, so that is different. And the King will also go to Wales and Northern Ireland, but otherwise the arrangements are broadly similar. The lying-in state first began with Edward VII in 1910, but oddly enough the first lying-in state was for a commoner, the great Liberal Prime Minister Mr Gladstone in 1898, and Edward VII, who unlike his mother Queen Victoria was rather an admirer of Gladstone, he dictated the following of that tradition, which has been there for every monarch since. Though the Queen, I think, will be the first to have her funeral at Westminster Abbey since George II in 1760. That is a break with tradition. So broadly speaking, the traditions are there, but they're being tweaked a little, as they always must be.
We see the Walesers talking to the crowds at Windsor. Many of them have brought their flowers and are expressing their condolences to William and Kate there. And of course, the Queen, who we've been told has now been transferred into an oak coffin and is currently in the Balmoral Ballroom. After the funeral, she will be brought up the Long Walk to Windsor and interred, of course, within Windsor in St George's in Windsor. Am I right, Vernon? That's
yes,
where it will be.
Where monarchs
yes,
are interred.
yes, indeed so. Let's bring in Rihanna, who is watching this walkabout. I'm just minded to say, as we look at this, and the statement that the Prince of Wales put out just half an hour ago, that one of his biggest assets will be his wife, of course, the Princess of Wales, who he says has had 20 years of getting used to this role.